What are the differences between managing and leading? And if we take that a step further, what's the difference between leadership and servant leadership? Today, we're going to find out. Welcome to episode 24 of the Key Hire Small Business Podcast, where we cover issues that help small business owners scale their business. I'm Corey Harlock, creator of Key Hire Solutions, where we help small businesses grow with our talent, and I'll be your host. Our guest today is Kurt Uhlir, and Kurt has an impressive resume. He's been a part of 60 plus capital raises and acquisitions, including part of the small business team leading an $880 million IPO. He has a passion for closely owned businesses and once brought 8 companies to the first Made in America roundtable at the White House, another awesome accomplishment. And he's a firm believer that generalists outperform specialists in growing almost any company. That is a podcast for another time. But we'll have a great conversation with Kurt today. Matt, let's bring Kurt on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, how are you?
Great.
Your backdrop looks awesome. You said you are in the hills of
North Georgia.
Very cool. It looks very mountainy. You got the fieldstone kind of fireplace behind you there. Is that a fireplace or is it just a fieldstone?
This is actually a lot of the property. About half of the house is this rock wall all around and downstairs. So my father-in-law built this great house, a 25-foot cabin, cabin 25 foot off the ground. We call it the tree house. But,
for real?
It's this great and massive property that we inherited.
Super cool, man. Sounds like a great place to be.
It is a lot better thanks to Starlink. When I only had 10 megabyte DSL, it was a little hard to do business up here.
You can get your gig now? You have your gig?
Yes.
Good. Cool. Look, it sounds like you have some really cool experience dealing with private held businesses, helping them raise some funds, IPOs, walking companies through different phases of their business. Just give us kind of the 30,000 foot overview of how you came to do that.
I mean, I was successful enough in operations with small businesses. When I was 13, I knew I was going to have to form 2 LLCs at 14, which I ended up doing. And those, a lawn care business and then literally a flea market kind of business. We ended up morphing into a bunch of retail stores. I've always been really good at scaling things. I came out with a master's, went into technology. I typically am in high growth technology companies, but my heart has always been where I started, helping entrepreneurs, people that often get limited by themselves or their processes, and the things that we naturally have to do to grow a company from 5 million to 50 million or 50 million to 250 million. Like, it's just same things that's holding back an electrical company or a plumbing company from growing from 5 people to 15 people. And so I try to steward so much of my time now, taking what I've learned in corporate America and helping coach and guide people through how to do that in their family businesses.
It's very cool. And so where have you seen that tech bubble or tech companies? Where have you seen that go from when you were started in it? Because it used to be the hot thing, right? VC was all there. People were throwing money at it. And do you still dabble in that world, or what changes have you seen in that world?
That's still where I spend most of my time. So like most of my time is spent today, like with a company called EZ Home Search. And so they're a competitor to Zillow and homes.com and realtor.com. And so technology, both for consumers and the local partners. That's where I spend most of my time, because like I'm a scaler by nature. I like to see things grow. And so I also find if I was to step into a small family-owned business, whether it's 5 people or 50 people, I'm often going to kind of drown that person with wanting to go so fast. It may not actually be helpful for their family life. So good from a coach, but if I'm going to be there full time, it needs to be at a company where we can have that hockey stick growth. And either it's a burning ship, and I love joining those where everybody else is fleeing, and I'm like, but there's a big pile of money at the end of this for the investors. Or in the case like Easy Home Search, it's just such a massive opportunity. It's like we can grow something from nothing to hundreds of millions of dollars in a couple of years. So.
Awesome. That's cool insight. Well, today we're talking about coaching versus leading and servant leadership. And so in your experience, I guess let's break down the definitions, right? So let's start with coaching versus leading?
Well, for me, the definitions of those two, those are going to be actually almost one thing. We can talk about the nuances. When I talk to most people, or I get brought in an executive coach or helping one of these family businesses or close to home businesses, how they view leadership is not leadership to me. It's management. And so I think that's one of the things we'll talk into about what's holding them back. For me, there's really only two styles of leadership. There's a style that'll go into servant leadership, which we can define, which is nuance, but there's a style where I'm hiring you to accomplish a business purpose. And then my job after I hire you is to help you accomplish that as quickly as possible and as for a long time. And then there's really the other side. And you can be the nicest person in the world, but it's called management. And it's often micromanaging, which at the underlying it is how most people view leadership is this threat, sometimes by a really nice person that is either do this the way I do what I say, the way I say it in the time frame I say, or you're fired. And at the end of the day, like that can get you really to go really fast with your business for a very short amount of time. But it's not a great way to continue growing things for a variety of reasons. One is like sometimes you'll, from that traditional leadership viewpoint, that authoritative leadership. So like maybe that's the difference, coaching versus authoritative leadership in my mind. That authoritative leadership means that, well, one, I only care about what you can do for me almost in this payroll period or this quarter, because like if you get into elder care, you have a kid that has special needs, or your spouse goes through cancer or something. Well, even if you've been the most productive person for the last 6 months, and when you get through this 6 months, you'll still be the most productive person I've ever hired. In that time period, the authoritative leader often will say, well, there's the door. It also requires that the authoritative leader is actually right about what they want done and how they want it done, and that there's not a better way. And I've been in so many businesses. We mentioned 60 plus acquisitions and capital raises. I know one thing that makes me never want to be an authoritative leader. And I know that I'm wrong about at least 3 things in my business today that I think I'm right about. And oh my God, like I'm not making decisions. I'm not asking my team to do things knowing that I'm wrong. I'm doing it knowing that I'm right. And if I'm an authoritative leader, there's not a culture that's giving them the flexibility that the coaching side would. And the coach says, look, I hire you to accomplish these business outcomes. And after that, my job is to help you be as successful in reaching those business outcomes as possible. And so at that point, that changes what I tell you, how I show you what we're trying to do, how I interact when you don't reach things. And so that's how I would define coaching versus really authoritative leadership.
Yeah. And you said a lot there that triggered thoughts in me and had me thinking. You talked about the do it my way in my time frame. And I often use the example. If I told someone to go sweep the warehouse, right? I need you to sweep the floor in the warehouse, and you have 1 hour to do it. And I go 30 minutes later and they are 75% done. And I grab the broom and say, you're doing it wrong. This is how you should be doing it. What have you just done? Actually, the way they were doing it was more efficient than your way, but you're not seeing that. What you're seeing is, no, I need you to do it my way. And that's a great analogy for leaders to keep their business kind of your way might be worth $10 million of business. And someone might have a way that could get you $50 million of business, but you're so stuck on, this is what got me here. This is what works. This is how I've done it, right? So it takes a lot of owners have to be vulnerable to a point when their businesses, they peter out, right? They Peter principle out, where the processes and the people and everything they built is built to do X amount.
Right.
And now they got to break it, right? You come in and say your baby's ugly. We got to break this thing to grow. It takes a lot. And then the other thing you said about, micromanaging. I've interviewed, I don't know, tens of thousands of people. And there's one thing I have never, ever heard in an interview. And that's someone saying, man, I love to be micromanaged.
Yep.
No one ever says it. I did an interview today. I had a first. This is funny. One of the guys on the interview on the video call, he's like up in northern Canada doing some hunting, and he was holding a shotgun. Well, we conducted the video interview because he was in bear country. And I was like, man, that is a first. I've done lots of these interviews. I've never had anyone do an interview holding a shotgun before, but it was kind
nice.
of cool. Yeah. Okay. So that's, I like that distinction, right? Because there is what I call end result management. Don't manage the process. It's
Right.
When I was in college, I don't remember a lot from my college days, but the one thing I learned was one of the profs taught us the cat box method, right? Or the cat box theory. As long as the cat poops in the box, there's no problem. They poop outside the box, we got a problem, right? So you give people wide parameters to accomplish a task and then manage the result and not the steps they take to get it, as long as they stay within those parameters.
Right. Well, and that requires what so often I find, the smaller the business is, the more I hear from the owner or owners that they don't have time. And so they don't take the time to explain to their people. Like you give the example of sweeping the warehouse. They don't, that if you ask the person why they're sweeping the warehouse, you may get an answer. But is it the answer that they're really asking that's really behind it? Because like I find people lie, not intentionally, but if I ask you a question, you're generally going to give me an answer, and it's often the first thing that comes out of your mind, not necessarily even what you actually believe. And so, well, why am I asking you to sweep it? Is it because the health inspector is coming? Is it because I want to reduce safety? Is it because, like, there's a whole bunch of reasons that I could be asking you to do, and you can't take the time on every single time you ask somebody to do something. But in general, you should be able to go to that janitor of the company and ask them, what are you wanting that person to do? And here's, to your point, here's the outcomes I'm wanting for the company that your role goes into. And then they should be able to get pretty close, directionally right. When you ask, if I came up and said, why are you being asked to sweep this floor? They shouldn't be too far off from what would be the realistic answer. And so to your point, if we go back many years, and so like with the warehouse example, my brother is an amputee. He lost his arm above the elbow in a factory accident making paint.
Wow.
Who saved his life was the janitor.
Sure.
And it was for two things. One, he was the only person on the entire line of the factory line that had the stomach to actually step in and help and take direction, because my brother coached them. And two, that gentleman believed that his job was to keep everybody else safe by doing his janitorial job. So
Right.
it was actually his job to step in and ask.
There's that old story. I don't know if it was a hospital chain or if it's just, a myth or whatever, but about everyone, they were so clear on their mission is we're here to save lives, that if you stop, the person who was restocking the bandages or whatever, and they say, well, what's your job here? And they say, I'm here to save lives. And
Right.
It's true. It's all equally important. So it's a cool nuance between leadership and management, or even authoritative management. Or I don't consider micromanagement authoritative, because I think it comes from a place of weakness, of lack of capacity or lack of experience. And that's why we micromanage. But that's a whole other conversation. But then if we carve out leadership out of that conversation and then put servant in front of it,
Right.
Now that changes the definition again.
Yeah, it does. So for me, what is servant leadership? It steps in with both how I should act as the owner towards my employees, and how I'm telling them to act as employees of the company. Like their job is to help serve the company or serve the customer directly at the end of the day. And I need to be telling them that. So the business outcome is we want happy customers that pay us this amount of money. And so like at any type of business, but as a servant leader, my job is that every day to step in and ask myself, like, one, are there things that I need to be doing that only I can do to serve the company? And hopefully those are getting smaller and smaller as I'm doing the second part, which is how do I serve you as somebody that I've employed, or somebody that is leading other people that we've employed to accomplish those outcomes that we want. At which point then, like I mentioned, I've been at tech companies. There have been times where the single best thing that I could do is go out and order food for the engineers, either if they're in the office or to be shipped to their house, because we were trying to hit some deadline for customers.
Right.
And be like, hey, I'm asking you all to work more hours. We need to get this in. I already would know if they're single or if they have families, if they had dietary restrictions. And I'm like, food will be arriving at each of your houses at 5 to 5:30 local time. And that was by far the most valuable thing I could do for the company, because where we were at in those times that I've done that is we had to hit deadlines for a variety of reasons, and I couldn't code, but those people that were doing the work could.
So that's empathy, understanding what you're asking of them, and then trying to soften the blow a little bit, letting them know, hey, I know I'm asking you to do it. I get it, right? I guess at the end of the day, that's what you're saying is, I get it.
Well,
So
well,
here's what
both
I'm
an
going to try to
empathy,
do to help you.
both in empathy and in just practicality. Like, hey, otherwise you're going to have to take off and go feed your 5-year-old, or or make dinner for grill dinner for your wife or something. And like, well, no, that's something that you're just going to have to do. Like, I've got
Yeah.
that covered for you.
Yeah, your family can't starve or miss a meal tonight because I'm asking you to pull an all-nighter with me here.
Right.
So oftentimes, I think that the generic understanding of what servant leadership out there would sound something like, I'm here to serve my people, and it's almost this, I'm with you, or even supporting you. I'm kind of pushing you up. And I'm going to create this culture where we're thinking of others, and we are putting others before ourselves, in a sense. Is that how you interpret servant leadership?
I wouldn't disagree with that, but that's not what I would lead with. I actually think if you go to ChatGPT or Perplexity, or you read almost any of the
Spoken like a true tech guy. Go to chat, first thing out of your mouth, ChatGPT.
Yeah, well, it's like if I go and ask any of them, like, tell me about servant leadership, they're almost always going to give a definition that will have empathy in the term, and there's nothing wrong with that. I could and by all means, one servant leadership has been around for thousands of years, like this authoritative leadership versus servant leadership. While the concept, what did come out of a gentleman who's a Christian, and a lot of people that I know that preach servant leadership, they come at it from a moral or religious perspective, and I don't disagree with that. That's great to get there, but like, I do believe it's the right way personally to treat people. But if I just look at it from a P&L perspective, like,
Right.
if you give me money and say, go make this pile of money as big as possible in the shortest amount of time. Well, there's a risk perspective about, I want to reduce failure. Well, if I put up authoritative leadership versus a servant leadership approach, where I said, look, empathy is part of how I accomplish it, but my job is to help you understand why I've hired you. It's not to do a task, it's to hit an outcome, to your point, to understand that you're not a robot, you're a person. And then, like, you're going to need coaching, you're going to need training. Like, I do agree with your statement on, like, micromanaging, where it's like a lot of it is weakness in the person. A lot of it is also really good intention, but the person doesn't understand that they should be pulling up alongside the person,
Right.
and teaching them like a master craftsman, as opposed, and that's their intention, but it comes across as micromanaging because they've never been trained. And so for me, empathy is part of how I get there, but it really is that concept that says, look, if I'm the owner, especially of a closely owned business, I could be better at doing every job in my company than you are, and everybody I hire. That's why I started well, and I had to hire my first person, my 15th person. But my job is to every day help make those people get better and better, and then preferably not want to go out and start something else. Like, I've got a couple of friends that are general contractors, and they have this horrible problem where they only want to pour so much into their people, because what happens to most general contractors? They train their project managers so well that they go, I can make more money by becoming a GC myself. And I'm like, well, first of all, there's ESOPs and employee stock option, and pay, you can do profit sharing. But I'm like, running a business sucks for so many reasons. Like you haven't created an environment where they just feel stable, and that, like, everybody should be making money for this. And like, it's not even a concept to most of them. And so for me, empathy is definitely part of it, but empathy is how I get there. Now, as a firm Jesus follower, I always care about people. Like, you could put me in any industry, and I will get super passionate about the industry and problems we're trying to solve, not because I actually care about the technology of the problems, but I care about the people that I'm working for. So empathy is just going to come along with me. But for me, I think in the leadership, it's the tool that gets me to, how do I help you be more productive, more profitable for yourself and for me tomorrow and the next day versus today. If you don't think I care about you, if you don't think the company cares about you, and, like, if you're more scared to come and tell me that your wife just got cancer and you're going to be less productive for the next 30 to 60 days while you start to figure out that process, God, what's the next 30 to 60 days going to look like for you? Like, I'm still going to lose the productivity. And the worst case is I might lose one of the best employees I ever have, as opposed to having an environment that says, you should call me before you almost call your brother to tell you that's going on.
And you bring up such a good point, and you mentioned that earlier, about, I will have a client call me and say, I got so and so, and they were great, but I don't know what's happened the last couple of months. Like, I don't know I think I'm going to need to fire them. And I'm like, whoa, 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 call them in and have a conversation, and
Right.
this should be the first thing out of your mouth.
Absolutely.
Is everything okay? How's it going? I've noticed you've been struggling a little bit. Like, are you okay? And that's the reality, is shit happens. We all live lives, and life can get messy, right? And we got to deal with it. And we did an episode a while back on exactly that, like mental health. And I have employees who's struggling. How can I help them? And we talked to a doctor, psychology, and he was saying, yeah, you're obligated to help them, but only to a point. Like, if it starts hurting your business, then you have crappy decisions to make, right?
Right.
But the other side of that is, they could be your best employee and they go through 3 months of, say, negative productivity.
Right.
So you fire them. But if they were your best employee, the chances of hiring someone as productive as them, well, the stats are most people only get it right 1 out of 3 times, right? So you might have to hire 3 people to get 1 person that works out.
Right.
Then there's a 1 in 3 chance that person is as good, if they're a top performer, they're an average performer, or they're a below average performer, right? So the odds of replacing that skill, talent, that tribal knowledge is so much more, there's more risk and so much more expensive. And then the ROI is long tail, because you're starting with someone new, when you could have just helped this valuable employee. Their life got tough when it wasn't convenient for you, or you were busy. That's not the right way to say it. It wasn't convenient. It was a bad time for them to have a bad time.
Right.
And so you make a knee-jerk reaction, and now you've really hurt your business long term.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think we'll get into some of those common mistakes of servant leadership. And one of those that I have, one of those I'm going to have, one of those we'll talk about, is exactly what you're saying, and not just on the top performers. I agree with everything you said. I would extend that to even hiring somebody new early on. So many people, they don't want to do what you just said about calling that employee and have a firm conversation. And like, I'm a firm believer in healthy conflict, to the point it's literally in every job description I hire for that says, one of the things I'm searching for is somebody that accepts and thrives in healthy conflict. Because, like, whether it's your best performer that's now not performing, as you mentioned, or somebody new that you hire as a salesperson and they're not cutting it, what most people don't tell themselves, especially in closely owned businesses, is what's the outcome if you don't have that conversation? You mentioned it. Well, either the new hire or the less productive employee now, they're going to be fired. And so if you have that conversation with them, I mean, if somebody's not cutting it for whatever reason, whether they were productive or they're a new hire, the outcome is you're going to have to fire them at some point if they can't get the job done. And so you just need to be honest with yourself that says it doesn't help them, doesn't help your company right now. And it definitely doesn't help the employee if it's going to be a shock in 90 days or later that says, like, wait a second, I'm fired, when you could have had the conversation up front. So to your point, if something has happened in their life, you've now figured out and been able to uncover and make the decision about, is it something that you can help with or not? And more often than not, like, I have a dear friend of mine. He leads a major division for a large publicly traded construction company. And it's like, I heard from him, like, one of his salesperson for services just wasn't cutting it. And what I kept hearing from him was, well, I've been telling her to do it better. And I've now told her that if she doesn't hit numbers, this is what's going to happen. And at no point did I ever hear, and I'm a firm believer of, unsolicited advice is criticism. So he didn't ask me for this. But what I'm hearing from him was, at no point did you say, you're not hitting your numbers, I'm going to pull up alongside of you for 3 hours over each of the next 3 to 5 days and do your job with you and let you see me do it. And I'm going to watch you. And, like, no part of, he just told her, if you don't get your numbers, you're out. Right. And so he ended up firing her. And I'm like, but I know that he can sell. And I'm like, God, how beneficial would it be? And how clear would it have been to let her see him make phone calls and send emails for
Sure.
2 hours one day and 3 hours, and then go, well, I never even thought about replying that way. And like, that would be my advice. And it comes out of what, to your point, the common mistake is people won't have those discussions that says, you're not cutting it. Let's talk about what's actually going on. This is not your firing discussion. But if we don't have an open conversation, this is where we're going to lead. And I don't want that, because I want you to hit your numbers.
And the other side, the way I see that is, because you come at it from the business side, I come at it from the human capital side. Like, these are people with lives.
Right.
They got families, they got kids in school, they got mortgages, and that whole adage, well, if they don't work out, we'll just fire them. That makes my skin crawl. And I won't do business with people with that mentality, because we're generally hiring senior level people, right? And they have responsibilities and families, and it's not fair. And if you didn't put the right hiring process in, or you didn't know what you needed, or you didn't hire for the right skills, and you bring someone in and then they don't do what you were hoping they would do, and then you fire them, shame on you.
Right.
At a point. So
absolutely.
And you said, I agree earlier. You said, I agree with everything you said. I was going to say, man, that's the first time that's ever happened. Thanks. I appreciate it. Okay. So one of these mistakes is, by trying to be a servant leader, is not having the discussions up front, the tough discussions up front. And we go back to, again, I just want to reiterate, like, people go through a rough time, and if you help them through, you're going to get loyalty. But it's actually better for your business than bringing someone else in, right? If you can weather the storm with them, especially if they have family. Like, I know if my wife were to get sick and I was working for someone, I wouldn't be able to do my job, right, even remotely. Like, I wouldn't be able to do it. And if someone then fired me while I was going through that, man, that would be devastating, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things where, and we're all unique in people, and it's like, part of finding and building productive teams for me is just knowing, like, I'm weird and nuanced in a lot of different ways, and so are you. And like, once I know, like, how you're weird and how you need to be talked to, and how do you like appreciation being given to you, and like, that's actually much of the battle to me over like skill development. Like, I can develop skills, but it's like figuring out who you are as a person. Like, that's the kind of more difficult piece. And so the moment I figure that out, like, gosh, other people could have thought you were an underperformer, but we know how to talk through each other. Like, I've got a couple engineers. I'm working with an engineer at Easy Home Search right now. That was like one of the reasons I recommended him. We hired him like in the first interview. The CTO did was, I know him very well and we speak to each other. And so when I'm giving suggestions about the product, we can just cut through that. And he knows how to come to me when with things that an engineer have ambiguous direction from somebody, and go, can you clarify for this? Well, gosh, that might take somebody else 8 months to get through. And because Zach and I know each other, well, we were able to get through that in 18 minutes of an interview and just start working productive.
So it's, I think what you were saying was, another mistake people make when they attempt servant leadership is not to understand that you're not managing a team. You're not managing a group of people. You're managing a team of individuals, and they each might require different communication style, or soft touch, hard touch, whatever it might be, right? How to get the best out of the individual is you have to personalize that, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you personalize it for them. I mean, it all kind of goes underneath that concept we were talking about like micromanaging versus leading or coaching kind of thing. And so it's like, I don't want to hold people accountable. I want to hold people accountable, or hire people that will hold themselves accountable, but I don't want to hold their hand. So I want to know what's going on with you. I want to have those conversations. I want to know how and help the relationship, so we talk to each other in an effective way. Sometimes that's healthy conversation. And then not hold your hand when you do this. Like, I don't need to be your parent. You're an adult. So
yeah. That's one of my biggest sales pitches when I talk to people. I'm like, man, this is a great company. They hire good people and then treat them like adults.
Right.
That's a big deal.
And it's a huge deal, especially nowadays. And it's like, I think that's so much where people talk about, you hear people, and I mean, I'm well into my 40s, and You hear people in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and they talk about the younger generation, and now Gen Z is so far into the workforce, like they're not young anymore. But it's like they talk about like, well, these people don't want to work, and I was like, no, you just don't sit down and talk with them and treat them like adults. You're talking to them and giving them assignments as if they were a 12-year-old that you probably shouldn't be telling your 12-year-old how to do work that way. Like I may tell you I need the lawn mowed, but I'm not going to tell you the stripes have to be exactly this far apart and
Yeah.
and walk through every little bit of them. I'm going to say, go mow the lawn.
Like every generation had their top performers, their mid performers, and their weak performers.
Right.
They still exist. It's still out there. It's just hiring is harder because there are more jobs and fewer people and more competition.
Right. And so there's that, and then that third thing that for like the common mistakes for me that would really stand out, and it's almost the antithesis of some of the others where I was like, don't micromanage, where it's like you do need to tell people the outcomes you want, but I find that there's this people tend to go very much on opposite ends of what should be a spectrum. They'll either just tell people, here's the numbers I need you to hit, and they just give them to them and say, and they'll tell them exactly how to do it, that micromanagement. Or on the other side, they hand off things before they should have, especially as the owner of a closely owned business. Like my suggestion would be almost always, if you're looking to be that servant leader and scale things, is there's you should hand off as much as you possibly can in your business so that you can be the mad scientist and figure out something new in your business. I don't care if you're a well company, which I'm waiting on a well company to call me back right now. If you're an electrical company, if we're running a service-based company or a technology company, your job as the leader should be to make space for you to mad scientist different parts of your business until you can find something that's highly repeatable and then hand it off. So that's kind of the opposite of not micromanaging, because I'm needing to figure out things that are that can be repeatable. But the key for me there too is don't hold on to certain things until you find what's repeatable. But whoever you're going to hand it off to, you should be very transparent with them about two things. You should be transparent with them about the business outcome you're trying to solve or the opportunity and what you're experimenting with. You might go through 6 iterations. I was at an executive at eXp Realty. We took them from like the 15th largest real estate brokerage to the number 1 real estate brokerage. I took like 12 to 14 months to completely, while my content team, which was more than 24 people, were building content, writing millions of words for this company. I took over a year and was mad scientisting a complete new way of working with our outside agencies and teams and building stuff with SEO. But I let the people on my team know regularly, here's the new stuff I was trying. It probably took 6 to 7 iterations before I found something. And it was way more productive, but it also wasn't a shock to them when we completely changed anything. They knew that it was coming. My operations manager that I was going to hand it off to got to see a lot more of it. So they knew the outcomes I was trying to accomplish, but also they got to see me failing, which gives them permission to fail because they're not going to listen to you. But they got to see me struggling with stuff that I didn't have figured out. Also then trusting them with, go do the stuff I've already given you trusting with.
Yeah. What I heard you say there was it's important, though, that it be repeatable before you hand it off.
Yeah.
Help me understand that a little more.
So there are, by all means, even when I have a repeatable standard operating procedure, when you talk to a client and schedule an appointment for our company, here's the things that I want you to do and the steps that I want you to do and the questions I want you to ask. I'm always going to be open to somebody having a new idea, asking more questions, because the outcome is we want happy clients. And so, but my standard operating procedure will be, here's what you do. And at the end of every day, like the reason I'm waiting for that well company to call me back today is because they told me they don't think that they can fit me in today, but they might. So I have an appointment on Wednesday, but they will let me know by the end of the day if they are going to be able to let me in, fit me in today, one way or not. That's an operating procedure that says they have a follow-up that says you're on standby, but call the client before you go home to let them know where they sit.
Right.
That's a standard operating procedure. Part of the nuance then would be like, for what's repeatable. Well, how do you get more business in there? Well, the reason I found that well company was the plumbing company, which is a competitor to another business from that owner that owns the well company. The plumbing company that was out today that said, it's not something we can do. You need a well company, recommended them. So the only thing you might be able to do that's not repeatable depending on the size of your business is go out and make those relationships.
Right.
And so, like, at some point, could you hand that off? Probably, but not if you're early on in your business, because each one of those might be hundreds of thousands of dollars of
Right.
relationship
Yeah.
business.
But I'm guessing you want it to be repeatable because you want to know, you want to have an idea what the probability of that, the outcome you want is. And if it wasn't, if you didn't have it dialed into a repeatable process and it was still kind of ad hoc, or it was mostly complete and you handed it off, there's some gray area in there where people might make their own decisions, or make their own decisions wrong, but they might get off track from what the purpose of that is, right? And so now they might start like ad-libbing within that process. And then if you go check up on it 3 months from now, it might not look anything like what you handed off.
Right. And that is where my guidance is different for the closely owned businesses that your audience typically is versus like larger tech companies and companies that have, 500, 5,000 people working for them. In those cases, I often may hire somebody to go figure out a problem. I'm going to coach much more involved. I'm going to make sure that it's not 3 months before I figure, before I get updates. But in more closely owned businesses, like dollars matter that much more, both in terms of actual dollars, but also percentage of the business for you and making sure everybody stays employed. And so in that case, like, well, no, you probably went from 2 people to 7 people with your electrical company because you're damn good at what you do, both in responding to companies, but also in solving problems. Well, in that case, you need to have stuff figured out before you bring somebody in. So.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Awesome. Now, if someone's out there thinking, hey, this sounds cool, or I've heard a bit about this servant leadership, or maybe I'm the authoritarian leader and I want to get more into, or the manager, I want to get more into leadership, maybe verge on servant leadership. What are the top 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give them to help get on track, or understand what that is, or do better at it?
Yeah, there's really 2 things. I mean, there's a couple of examples we can give underneath there. It's all going to fall underneath. You need to humble yourself. And I just say that I mentioned you're wrong about a number of things in your business. You just don't know it right now. But the good thing is you can do it by yourself. And so open up a Google Doc, open up a Word doc. It's got to be written. It is not as powerful to just do it in your head. But you need to open up something, and you're going to come back to it, which is why I like doing it on like your phone or a laptop or something. But I want you to start to write out what are the most common problems you've had in your business, like over the last like 2-5 years, especially in terms of people on your team. It could be lack of skills. They're not doing enough. They're not doing the most valuable things. They're busy but not productive. They're they're providing answers to customers, but they're not solving the customer's real problems. But like as granular as you can be for writing out these things, that you're handing off things to be accomplished before there's that repeatable process. I want you to write out what those things are, and then and your only job, and like, don't think you're going to get all these things listed out at once. Come back to it over a week or 2. But I want you to go do another pass when you're like, I've probably got 80-90% of what I could possibly get out on there. I want you to go back and under each one of those, I want you to write down what's been your part, what's been your action that caused that outcome in your business. And like, because this is where servant leadership comes. If you keep having a problem where the people that you hire aren't skilled enough, or you hire somebody and you think that they should be able to pick up the skills, but they're not, so you fire them, to your point, 6 months, 12 months later. Well, the underlying thing is either you're hiring the wrong type of person, or you're not coaching or training them and providing them an environment. But it's either way, it's your fault that they're your company. And so under each, did you kind of go through and go, all right, I clearly had problems for the company to be solved and opportunities, but I didn't have them written out enough so that I'm hiring a new chief marketing officer. I mean, this isn't a small company. I literally turned down a role with a private equity backed large media company about 9 months ago, where I'm 6 rounds of interviews. So as somebody in recruiting appreciates this, chief people officer reaches out to me. I've had my last 3 rounds with the CEO and the major investor private equity group. The job description basically said, we need a marketer to do marketing stuff.
Yeah.
I was trying to uncover from them, where do you see the opportunities in your business? And I ended up uncovering their viewpoint was just a little off from each other. And I'm like, you don't need to hire me. Or like, I appreciate you're going to make me an offer. You don't need to hire me until you two can get on the same page.
Yeah.
Like, and so that, I mean, the piece about servant leadership is whether the success and outcomes or the failure and outcomes, you have a part in it. Did you not explain to them those outcomes?
Yeah.
Did you not explain the jobs to be done, but then you told them it had to be exactly this way so they didn't feel like they could experiment? And then like start to talk to the people on your team about that. Once you've gone through this humbling experience, to be like, I feel like this is where the business has kind of been. And like you are wise enough once you've gone through that process to know how you need to have that conversation. You can't have that conversation transparently with everybody as open as you might want to, but especially if you have partners, if you have other people, if you have managers in your company, you need to maybe perhaps expose the entire list to them.
Yeah.
And give it to them the day ahead of time and say, I want to talk to you about this.
I saw a short or a podcast or something, but there was a guest, I don't know who it was, but they said the most freeing thing they ever did was the day they realized that everything was their fault.
Oh.
Everything.
At least then you can do something about it.
That's right. Everything's my fault. That is burdensome in the beginning, right? That feels like a big load to carry, but I believe, and I agree with you about being humble. Humility is one of the key traits I look for in potential clients. It took me a long time signing up people that didn't enjoy working with or weren't receptive to new ideas or whatever. But if you can key in and find people with humility who are willing to say, tell me what I'm doing wrong, or I don't know what I'm doing, or help. Right. Those are generally the people who are willing to make the changes, don't get mad when you tell them the baby's ugly, right? And say, hey,
right.
And the reality is, this is kind of where I always come from. To start a small business, you hire your friends, you hire your neighbors, you hire your neighbors' friends, and everyone pitches in, and everyone does whatever they have to do because they give a shit and they want that business to grow. And if they do a good job, here's the rub. Eventually, that business will outgrow all of their experience, and they will no longer be the people to push that business forward, right? And as the business owner who had that idea, that is the worst day of their life. When they realize the 1, 2, 3 people that gave me their blood, sweat, and tears over the last 2, 3, 5, 10 years and got me where I am today are not the people that can get me where I need to go. And then they have decisions to make. But I always tell my business owners, because a lot of times that's a conversation I have to have with them, is you will not make you can run this business for 50 years. This is the hardest decision you're going to have to make, to look at those people that gave you everything they had and say, I don't know what to do with you now, right?
But that's also when I have that conversation, when I realize that if I'm open to having that healthy confrontation discussion with those people, it gives them time to find the next role. It gives me time to call other business owners and go, hey, you're where I was 2 years ago, and I have somebody that will be great for you.
That's exactly the conversation we have, right? It doesn't have to be mean. It doesn't have to be cruel. We still need to show them respect because we appreciate the work we did. We don't need to turn them out. We just need to, we need to understand it. And then we need to sit down and talk with them and find a path forward.
Right. Well, and that's why this risk of this list of going through saying like, here's the problems I've had over the last 2 or 5 years with my business, and being as granular as you can. I mean, maybe you have to group them. It's good to share some of those things, even with your employees. There's going to be things that are not their fault. It doesn't involve them. Like so many small businesses fail because what happens? Like they were at 97% margin when they had $100,000 in revenue, and they're at 97% margin when they're at $1 million revenue. They never figured out this profit margin because every time they get a little more revenue, they just hire somebody new. And I'm like, well, part of your job of growing is to de-risk this for you, not just you, but also the families you're employing. And I'm like, I want you to be able to weather the storm. And so it's like, well, it hurts my heart when somebody's like, you had a thriving business. And wait a second. So if you get sick, you couldn't hire somebody to replace you right now for 6 months while you go through this. So everybody's out of work. That's a company problem. That's a you problem that your team can't solve, but you can start bringing it up. And then the discussion is, hey, we need to raise prices. Do we have enough value there? And like, there's things, if you bring that up to people, they'll go, well, actually we could upsell this. We could do these other things. You don't have to solve it by yourself, but it needs to go on the sheet, both as problems that maybe you've had or problems that you anticipate could be having, so that you could have discussions.
Man, this has been awesome, Kurt. I've enjoyed this conversation a lot. So I know you're busy, but if someone did want to kind of reach out and pick your brain or learn more about what you do or hire you, bring you on, how can we get in touch with you?
My personal website at kurtuhlir.com is the best place. I write a whole bunch of things there. We also kind of mentioned, I most of my time during daylight hours is not writing this for there. It's for easy home search, where especially for anybody in real estate, Preston and I and Travis do a ton of work. Literally, like, customers are actually no problem for us on the agent side. So we literally just steward a bunch of our time to try to give free information to make agents' lives better.
Well, that's awesome. Hey, man, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. Enjoy the hills of Georgia, right?
Georgia.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation, and we'll chat soon. All right, there he is, Kurt Uhlir. Awesome conversation. Very smart guy. Appreciate him taking time to join us on the podcast today. I'd like to thank you for tuning into the Key Hire Small Business Podcast. If you got value out of the episode today and want to keep up to date on our new content, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you prefer to listen to your podcast, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, whatever your favorite platform is. You just search up the Key Hire Small Business Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about working with Key Hire and how we can help your small business, you can schedule a meeting with us on our website. We are a help-first organization, so we guarantee no selling, no weirdness. We're just there to help if we can. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Corey Harlock, and until next time, stop grinding and start growing.